ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker for today. We are joined by Dr. Ross Greene. And actually, I will just let him introduce himself because I feel like he can do it better. But Dr. Greene, thank you so much for joining us today. We are delighted to have you back. We always enjoy having you here. And yeah, I'll let you get started.
I always enjoy being here, and thank you for inviting me to do this again. Do I have to introduce myself? Ross Greene, clinical psychologist, founder of the nonprofit Lives in the Balance, and at least based on what I was hearing this morning, apparently all around nice guy. But
And
whatever.
Dr. Green, I'm so sorry. I also forgot something.
Go ahead.
There is also a pre-survey as well in the chat. So if you've not filled out the pre-survey, Angelique will be dropping that into the chat. So as people are getting started, so sorry that I completely forgot about that. Angelique yes, thank you so much for putting that in the chat. So if folks could click that link, so this helps us to see if our offerings are effective. We have a pre-survey and a post-survey. So please take time to do that while Dr. Green is getting started. So thanks. Sorry, back over to you.
No worries. Um, it is my pleasure to be talking with you here for approximately 3 hours about the collaborative and proactive solutions model. Um, if you're familiar with The Explosive Child, my first book, that's where I first described the model in published form, anyways. Um, there's a new one coming out. I'll be talking about the new one briefly, especially on our first slide. It's called The Kids Who Aren't Okay: The Urgent Case for Reimagining Support, Belonging, and Hope in Schools. I think it's going to be out by January or February, but I just got what do they call this? The Advanced Readers Edition. Um, Not been doing anybody any good because I've changed the book quite a bit since they sent me those, or since they had that. We're talking about moving from power and control to collaboration and problem solving, but we are especially talking here about meeting kids where they're at. And that is the definition of good parenting. It's the definition of good teaching. It's the definition of good treatment, meeting kids where they're at. And you'll be hearing that theme um, come back over and over again as we're going through these 3 hours together here. Um, but as it relates to that new book, where I'm starting my talks these days is on the fact that it's harder than ever to be a kid. And that sounds a little cliche. I think it's true. I'm not much of a cliche guy. Um, there's a lot these days about how kids aren't doing very well. And when people tell us kids aren't doing very well, they point to higher than ever rates of depression and anxiety and concerning behavior and suicidality and chronic school absenteeism as indicators that all is not well. Now, my reading of the data and the tea leaves tells me that most kids still are doing okay. Um, More kids than ever are not doing okay. So something is definitely going on out there. And of course, what has grabbed our attention as it relates to what's going on out there with kids is because of a popular book, is social media. Um, we have to remember that most of the data on social media and its effect on kids is correlational. The strongest statement I think we can make that's data-based about the effects of social media on kids is that those who are way overusing it, are the ones whose mental health is most adversely affected. I think we can say that with some precision. Beyond that, we can't say that much about the effects of social media on kids with great precision. Um, Let there be no doubt, there are definitely things in social media that aren't good for kids to be accessing. Some of those things that are not good are more specific to females, and some are more specific to males. Um, the concern about social media and its effects on kids has led some schools and school systems to ban cell phones, which makes sense to me from a you don't want the kids to be distracted from their learning perspective, but it does not make sense to me as it will address any of the issues that are on the screen right now. From that perspective, banning cell phones is a rather narrow, rather limited intervention. And my fear is that it will cause us to lose sight of factors that have occurred over the last 2.5 decades that have made it harder to be a kid. Number one on my list, and I'm not going to go through all of these in great detail, but number one in my list is school shootings. Um, Columbine was 1999. The Columbine massacre was 1999. There have been over 400 school shootings since then, not including universities and colleges. Um, when I'm talking to kids and when I'm looking at data, I'm seeing that about two-thirds of kids are anxious about being shot at school. Can you believe that's coming out of my mouth? And about one-third of kids are extremely anxious about that. And by the way, this is interesting. The percentages are about the same for educators. Um, what did we do in response to those school shootings? We implemented zero tolerance policies. We went even heavier on the adult imposed consequences. Um, the data are in on zero tolerance policies. They made things worse. They definitely did not make us safer. And those over 400 school shootings that have occurred since Columbine and have occurred since we've been implementing zero tolerance policies are evidence of that. I'm going to go over to the second column here. High stakes testing. One of the worst ideas to ever come down the pike, in my opinion. Um, telling kids, telling educators that they had to get every student over the same bar by the end of the school year um, was a really bad idea. Worse, telling educators that their job performance and job security was going to be pegged to how their students did on high stakes tests, and that a school's performance was going to be pegged to how its students did on high stakes tests. Horrible. Doesn't take into account what is walking into every school classroom, developmental variability. Um, Developmental variability is what's walking in the door, a fancy way of saying all kids are different. Actually, I was doing a talk this morning um, for a group of pediatricians to help them know about the collaborative and practice solutions model. And I was saying to them that we all meet diagnostic criteria for developmental variability. We all have DV. If there's a diagnosis that applies to everybody, it's DV, developmental variability. Given the developmental variability, though, how much sense does it make to have us think that we're going to get every kid over the same bar by the end of the school year? Makes no sense. I'm doing this from home office. Um, it makes no sense if our definition of good teaching is meeting every kid where they're at and having every kid be their own reference point and gauging progress based on where we started with a kid and where we left them off. Um, Being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, very difficult. The world is set up for neurotypicals. The world is not set up for neurodivergent individuals. I believe that if we set the world up for neurodivergent individuals, the neurotypical kids would do even better, and the neurodivergent kids would do a lot better. Um, but if we set up the world for neurotypicals, the neurodivergent kids aren't going to do as well. I'm going to rush through the rest. There's research telling us that being a boy is much harder these days. Being a girl is much harder these days. Being LGBTQ plus is harder these days. We've known this for a long time. Being black or brown is harder and always has been. There's research, some people are surprised by this one, telling us that being white is harder these days. Um, Home and family life is harder these days, if only because it takes two incomes to produce the lifestyle that one used to. We cannot view children's mental health outside the mental health of their caregivers, and the research tells us that caregivers are doing worse than kids. It is tempting to blame COVID, by the way, but things were heading in the wrong direction on mental health of caregivers and caregiver mental health of caregivers and their kids um, before COVID. Things were heading in the wrong direction. Um, what are we all living through these days? Politics that are more divisive, I've read, than since the Civil War. Some people point to the decline of religion. Religion used to be a guidepost for many people about how to conduct themselves, how to treat other people. Used to be a give people community. With that gone, we're on our own. And social media. All right, what I say to educators when I go through these risk factors is you can't do anything about most of this stuff. So why do I bring it up? Because we can be sensitive to what's walking in the door, what's walking in our home, what's walking in our clinics. We can be sensitive to the fact that there are more vulnerable kids than ever these days. And we can be sensitive to the fact that more kids are struggling than ever and the ecosystem in which they are functioning. Um, there's our backdrop for the rest of the day. But it doesn't have to be the backdrop. I would be doing what you're going to be hearing about, even if those risk factors weren't there. So, what we're about to cover, and I consider this to be the most important part of what I talk about, are the five key themes of the collaborative and proactive solutions model. In one way or another, everything we cover for the rest of our time together here traces back in one way or another to these five key themes. And if you know my work, you may be familiar with these themes already, but here we go. Key theme number one. Oh, I should mention, for some of you, these key themes are going to be paradigm shifting. It all depends on how you were trained and where you're at now. How I was trained is not where I'm at now. I haven't been at where I was trained for a very long time. That doesn't mean I don't value my training, which was behavioral, by the way. It just means that I moved on. Whether I would have um, gotten to the place my head is at now without my behavioral training, I'm actually not sure. So I'm not disappointed that I started there, just that that's not where I am anymore and haven't been for quite a while. Where am I now? Well, I was trained, here's key theme number one, to focus on kids concerning behavior. And I was trained in some rather straightforward strategies aimed at modifying that behavior. And I don't do that anymore and haven't for a very long time. What do I think we should be focused on instead? The problems that are causing those behaviors and solving them. So for the unfamiliar, what you're about to hear about is a problem-solving model, not a behavior modification model. Now, here's the first question I often get about that. Well, how's the kid's behavior going to improve if we're not busy modifying it? There's lots of ways to improve a kid's behavior besides modifying it. You're about to hear about one of them, but medication is another one of them. Behavior modification does not have the corner on the market of improving kids concerning behavior. In this model, the CPS model, you are improving behavior by solving the problems that are causing those behaviors. You are improving behavior by solving the problems that are causing those behaviors. Plus, the research tells us CPS is an evidence-based model. What the research tells us in the studies that have compared CPS to the behavior modification approach is that as it relates to improving behavior, CPS and behavior modification are equivalent. as it relates to solving the problems that are causing those behaviors, well, rewards and punishments aren't problem-solving strategies. We should never expect a consequence to solve a problem. That's not what they do. What is concerning behavior viewed as in this model? Concerning behavior in this model is a frustration response. You could call it a stress response. Some people would call it a trauma response, but not every kid with concerning behavior has a trauma history. So I try not to use that term too loosely. I prefer frustration response. Um, if it's a frustration response, then it occurs when a kid is frustrated about something. What's the kid frustrated about? An expectation they're having difficulty reliably meeting, or what we in this model call an unsolved problem. I use unsolved problem and unmet expectation interchangeably. I use concerning behavior and frustration response interchangeably. For me, those are synonyms. Concerning behavior is the frustration response. It communicates to us that a kid is having difficulty meeting a particular expectation. That's what concerning behavior is. It's communication. Um, but you might be curious, what kind of what counts as an unsolved problem? Um, any expectation a kid is having difficulty reliably meeting. At home, that could be things ranging from difficulty brushing teeth before going to bed at night, difficulty turning off the Xbox to go to bed at night, difficulty turning off the Xbox to come to dinner, turning off the Xbox to engage in any other much more meaningful aspect of human life, difficulty being in bed by 8:30 p.m. with the lights and electronics off, difficulty being out of bed by 6:30 a.m. to get ready for school. I could go on forever. Unsolved problems at school, difficulty getting along with Trevor on the school bus in the morning, difficulty agreeing with Billy on the rules of the Foursquare game at recess, difficulty completing the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math, difficulty coming to school, difficulty coming to school on time. Once again, I could go on forever. But those are examples of unsolved problems that could cause concerning behavior in kids who are prone to concerning behavior. And now let me say this, the fact that the problem is still unsolved tells us that whatever we've done so far about that problem didn't work. And the fact that this is not the first time this kid has had difficulty with this unsolved problem. This kid's had difficulty brushing their teeth before going to bed for the last 3 years. Makes it an old unsolved problem. And most unsolved problems are old. Expectations a kid has been having difficulty meeting for a very long time. Now, that's sad that the kid has been having difficulty meeting that expectation for so long that the unsolved problem is what we might call unremitting. But it's also good in one way. If it's an old unsolved problem, then it's predictable. And if it's predictable, we can identify it proactively. And if we can identify it proactively, then it can be solved proactively. We'll get to the proactive part in greater detail after a few more key themes. But the most important thing for a lot of people to know is that concerning behavior is a frustration response. That's huge. What I said to the pediatricians this morning is something I've been saying lately. In other words, non-compliance is good. Non-compliance was very interesting to say in a society that is very strongly oriented around compliance. Non-compliance is good. It tells you that there's an expectation a kid is having difficulty meeting. Don't you want to know that? If you're a parent, don't you want to know that you're putting an expectation on your kid that your kid's having difficulty meeting? If you're an educator, don't you want to know that you're putting an expectation on a student that the student is having difficulty reliably meeting? I think you want to know. Non-compliance is also informative. If we view non-compliance as good, then non-compliance is also informative. If we're curious and try to find out what's making it hard for that kid to meet that expectation that's causing their frustration response. All right. What counts as a concerning behavior? We're not that picky. Any behavior that communicates to us that there's an expectation the kid is having difficulty reliably meeting counts. Now, you know us mental health professionals, we like to categorize things. And behavior is one of the things we've been busy categorizing for a very long time. An example might come from the trauma literature, where we have the categories of concerning behaviors of fight, flight, and freeze, which is fine, except that you're still talking about the kid's concerning behavior. You just categorized it. Um, you still don't have the most important information you need to really help this kid. There's still information missing. If we were to rely on the mother lode of categories of behaviors, we would turn our attention to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5, where we would be greeted with dozens of categories of behavior. Wait a second. When you're talking about a kid's psychiatric diagnosis, you're still talking about the kid's concerning behavior? Yeah, of course. Take a look at the diagnostic criteria for the vast majority of childhood psychiatric diagnoses, and what are you going to find? A long list of concerning behaviors. Now, this is important. I have categories of my own. They're fake. I'm one of the few people who's willing to acknowledge that his categories are fake. Mine are fake, but I use them for a very important reason, to make a very important point. It'll become clear momentarily. My categories of concerning behaviors are lucky and unlucky. What are lucky ways of communicating that there's an expectation you're having difficulty reliably meeting? Whining, pouting, sulking, withdrawing, crying. Why are those ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations lucky? Those ways aren't going to get you popped into timeout, aren't going to get you held in from recess, aren't going to get you held after school, aren't going to get you detention, suspension, expulsion, aren't going to get you hit. Many people don't know this, but did you know that we are still hitting kids in public schools with a 24-inch piece of plywood in 17 of our 50 American states? And we're doing it close to 100,000 times every school year still. Those lucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations aren't going to get you pinned to the ground by 2 to 4 adults, what's known as a restraint, aren't going to get you thrown into a locked or blocked closet-sized room, what's known as a seclusion. But best of all, those lucky frustration responses are highly likely to elicit empathy, nurturance, support from your caregivers. That's a lucky kid. Not so for the kids that I've been working with for the last 40 plus years. I've been working with the unlucky variety, and I wouldn't have done things any differently. What are unlucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations? I'm not going to be exhaustive here, plus you already know. Screaming, swearing, hitting, spitting, kicking, biting, throwing, destroying, running. Why are those frustration responses unlucky? Well, they are more likely to elicit all of those punitive, exclusionary, disciplinary practices I just mentioned, and they are far less likely to elicit empathy, nurturance, support from your caregivers. What's the difference between lucky and unlucky? Well, they're both communicating that there's an expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting. That's not a difference. The difference is how we treat them. Those kids with unlucky frustration responses often are on the receiving end of the most harsh punitive discipline our society has to offer, even though, as it relates to what the frustration response is communicating, the frustration response is communicating the exact same thing. There's an expectation the kid is having difficulty reliably meeting. All right, we're almost done with this first slide. This is a loaded with information first slide. There is less emphasis in this model on unmet needs. You haven't heard me say unmet needs yet. It's not because I don't believe in unmet needs. I think we all have unmet needs, but I find that when we adults are talking about unmet needs, some of them we can do something about, like if a kid is having difficulty finding enough to eat, we can feed them. That's an unmet need we can do something about. But a lot of the unmet needs we talk about are more hypothetical, more nebulous, more ambiguous, and those ones we really can't do very much about. And I'd rather us talk about the things we can do something about rather than the things we can't do anything about. So we talk about unsolved problems in this model. That's something you can always do something about. Next point is it's still an unsolved problem, even if it's not accompanied by concerning behavior. Absolutely. Every kid, every human being has expectations they're having difficulty reliably meeting. This model started with the ones who express the fact that they're having difficulty meeting expectations with big frustration responses, but the model applies to every kid and every human being because we all have difficulty meeting some expectations some of the time. All right. If we are going to make this massive shift, and I mean this is massive, from concerning behaviors, frustration responses, and modifying them to the problems that are causing those frustration responses and solving them, we're going to need different assessment practices. Because you know what primarily gets assessed when a kid is struggling and communicating that they're struggling through their concerning behavior? We assess their concerning behavior. We do behavior checklists. We do behavior observations. In schools, we do a functional behavior assessment so we can come up with a behavior plan, all focused on the frustration response, often not focused anywhere nearly enough on the problems that are causing the frustration response. In a little bit, I'll be introducing you, some of you may know about it already, to an instrument called the Assessment of Skills and Unsolved Problems. Assessment Gold, free, um, huge, game changer. That's key theme number one. The assessment of skills and unsolved problem is going to give us the information that's been missing. Skills, unsolved problems, and it's going to make the entire enterprise of helping this kid proactive from day one. Goodness. Now, I like to pause on key theme number one because key theme number one is big, and we've just covered an enormous amount of territory in just a little bit here. Anybody have any questions or comments about key theme number one? I like to pause on key theme number one. Oh my goodness, the chat is already full and I have not been paying attention. If you have a question, Brendan is making the point we tell children that violence is inappropriate and then use corporal punishment on them. Fascinating, right? I was doing a talk in Australia virtually some night this week. Today's Thursday, maybe Tuesday night, whatever night. And it was a talk on violence, and I referred to violence as a frustration response. Um, so what do I think violence prevention is about? Solving the problems that could cause the frustration response in the first place. I am seeing no questions or comments. Ashley, Missouri is one of these states that still uses corporal punishment. By the way, if you really want your heart to be broken, and I'm seeing no questions or comments, so oh, Gita, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, is asking, can you clarify the difference between unmet expectations and the behavioral antecedents in a functional behavior assessment. Antecedent is a rough synonym for unsolved problem. I prefer unsolved problem because it points us to what needs to happen next. The problem needs to be solved. Sometimes when people are using the term behavioral antecedents, what they do next is try to manage the environment um, um, and divine what is making it hard for the kid to meet an expectation. But if we use the term antecedent within a problem-solving context, I would have no problem with the term antecedent. I will say that a lot of people who use the term antecedent are looking for what happened just before the concerning behavior occurred as the source, as the cause of the concerning behavior. And sometimes it's not just before. Sometimes there's a lag. So I prefer unsolved problem over antecedent. Um, Mostly that's semantics, but it can have some practical implications. Let's keep going. Now, what was I going to say? Oh, if you really want your heart to be broken, I want to point you to a few videos that you could watch. I'm going to put you on the Lives in the Balance website now. This is the website of the nonprofit that I founded. And I'm going to take you to the advocacy section in the upper nav bar there. I'm going to take you to the public awareness section of the advocacy section of the website. And our first stop here is the documentary film that was produced by Lives in the Balance, came out in 2018. It's a feature-length documentary film. It is very hard to watch because it depicts in very graphic terms what we're still doing to kids here in the year 2025, just because they have unlucky frustration responses. If you scroll down the page, and this section is very hard to work because it shows videos of kids being restrained and secluded and arrested at school and being corporally punished. But what I want you to point you to is these ones down here. These two on the left here are the newest mini documentaries from Lives in the Balance. One is called Obsolete Brutality, the Need to End Corporal Punishment in Arkansas's Schools. And it's not just Arkansas, that's just the state that we had some partners that we partnered on that film with, and End the Harm, which is absolutely heartbreaking. Both are heartbreaking. Restraint and Seclusion in Michigan's Schools, that was done in collaboration with an organization called End SAR, End Seclusion and Restraint Michigan. Those are two also worth watching. So there's quite a bit waiting for you here on in the advocacy section on the public awareness page of the Lives in the Balance website. Let's go back to my slides. I think I see one other thing in the chat, or maybe two. Is ASIP data collected from both the child and collateral info, or just asked directly the child? Not the child at all, just the caregivers. Key thing number two. Now that we're solving problems with kids, we need to think about what kind of problem solvers we want to be. Us adults tend to be real keen on problem solving of the unilateral kind. That's where the adult decides what the solution is and imposes it on the kid. Not only does the adult decide what the solution is, the adult decides what's getting in the way of the kid meeting a particular expectation and imposes it on the kid. That's not this model. Um, And this model of problem solving is of the collaborative kind. This is something you're doing with the kid, not to the kid. And we have just arrived at one of the two key mantras of the CPS model: ask the kid. This is an ask the kid model. Your number one source of information on what's making it hard for a kid to meet a particular expectation is the kid. As you would imagine, that tends to give rise to a few questions like, what if the kid won't talk to you? We refer to those kids as kids who can talk but aren't. What if the kid's non-speaking refer to those kids who aren't talking because they can't. Um, my two favorite populations of kids. I find that reluctant talkers, the kids who can talk but aren't, do talk. Once we stop talking with them about their concerning behavior, our favorite subject, and start talking with them about the problems that are causing those behaviors, things they've been struggling with for a very long time, I find in those kids that not only do they talk, we have difficulty getting them to stop. And people solve problems collaboratively all the time in one way or another with non-speaking kids. I'm always telling people don't sell those non-speaking kids short. They can participate in one way or another in solving the problems that are affecting their lives. And the next new page on the Lives in the Balance website will have video showing people working with non-speaking kids. Um, we all communicate. Not all of us communicate in words, um, but we all communicate. The biggest question I get about this collaborative business is how are you going to hold the kid accountable if you're not using consequences? I've always thought that was a very fascinating question because I've actually never thought the consequences were a very good way of holding a kid accountable. When you're consequencing a kid, the kid is the passive recipient of your imposed solutions, your imposed consequences, no thinking, no engagement, no accountability. You want to hold a kid accountable? Engage them in the process of solving the problems that are causing their concerning behavior. That's accountability. Now, if we have educators in our group here, I'm thinking that a lot of you might have had the four-letter word that plagues all new initiatives in schools these days pop into your head already. TIME, time. When do you think we're going to do this? I get it. But here's what I also get. We are taking an enormous amount of time chasing after concerning behaviors with these kids in schools. Nothing takes more time than a problem that is still unsolved. So, yes, while solving problems with kids does take some time, it doesn't take anywhere nearly the amount of time that we're taking with those problems still unsolved. But I fully, happily acknowledge that whoever designed the school schedule didn't take into account, whoever designed the school schedule around academics, 100% academics, didn't take into account that there were going to be a lot of kids who struggled with those academics, and we were going to need time to help those kids. Apparently, we forgot that part. So we have to help a lot of schools retrofit their schedule so that their staff have time to solve problems with their students. Otherwise, they're spending an enormous amount of time with those problems remaining unsolved. Let's check the questions here real quick. Nancy's asking, do you think that there is any difference if the kids pick or collaborate on a consequence? Great question. There is no consequence that will solve a problem. When we get into the problem solving process, what I just said will become crystal clear. But just real quickly, when you're solving a problem in this model, you're trying to find out what's making it hard for a kid to meet a particular expectation. And you're putting the adult's concerns on the table about why it's important that that expectation be met. Um, Consequences don't address the concerns of both parties. Consequences are not problem-solving strategies. So I don't really care who picks the consequence. The problem is going to remain unsolved. Scott is saying, when I do a behavior contract, I involve the child in both coming up with positive and negative consequences for their decisions. Scott, now you know what I think of that. Consequences don't solve problems, any problems. Often they just send those problems underground. Consequences are behavior modification strategies, not problem-solving strategies. So whether you involve the kid in coming up with the consequence or not, you're still not solving anything. You might have the collaborative part down, but you're not solving any problems. That's huge. Thank you for those questions. All right, key theme number three. We've got one more in there. Jennifer Like is saying, "You're blowing my mind. I love this." Glad to be blowing your mind. Um, the problem solving, if we're going to be solving problems collaboratively, we're going to have to think about our timing. As you all know, a great deal of the intervention that takes place for kids with concerning behaviors takes place in the heat of the moment, emergently, reactively. Bad timing, unnecessary timing. 99.9% of what you're doing in this model is planned, proactive. Um, which brings us to the second key mantra of the model. Don't be late. As you'll see in the next two slides, a lot of what we do in schools, but also everywhere else, is late. Crisis management. You don't want to be late. You want to be early. Crisis prevention. So mantra number two is don't be late. Ask the kid, don't be late. If you ask me, what are the two biggest takeaway messages that I hope you take from these 3 hours that we're going to be spending together? And we are going to take a 10-minute break in the middle, perhaps more for my benefit than for yours. I have the cold that never ends. Um, if you remember, if you don't remember anything else from these 3 hours, it's ask the kid, don't be late. Boy, do we spend a lot of time training people what to do when it's already late. I'll get into that in the next two slides. Um, but the biggest question I get about that don't be late mantra is how can we be planned and proactive if we never know when the kid's going to get upset, if we never know when the kid's going to struggle, if the kid is so unpredictable? Here's the answers. The kid is not unpredictable. You know exactly when the kid's going to struggle. You know when the kid's going to run aground um, if you answer two questions right up front. The very two questions answered by the assessment of skills and unsolved problems. Why and when? As in, why do some kids respond so poorly to problems and frustrations? Why is this specific kid responding so poorly to problems and frustrations? When do kids exhibit concerning behavior? When is this kid exhibiting concerning behavior? Now, the answer to the question why is provided to us by the research that has accumulated over the last 40 to 50 years on kids with concerning behavior. And that research can be summarized in one sentence. And here goes. Why do some kids respond so poorly to problems and frustrations? Because they're struggling with the skills that are involved in responding adaptively to problems and frustrations. Keyword, skills. Missing word, motivation. There is not a single study telling us that kids who respond poorly to problems and frustrations are poorly motivated. That study doesn't exist. There is a mountain of research telling us they are struggling with skills. What skills? There are lots of them. Our global skills are flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, emotion regulation. You're going to come face to face with even more when I introduce you to the assessment of skills and unsolved problems. But skills is a much more compassionate, much more accurate, much more productive set of lenses. And it's what the research has been telling us for a very long time. So thank goodness the assessment of skills and unsolved problems is going to help us figure out what skills this kid is struggling with. That's for helping make sure people have the right lenses on. When do kids exhibit concerning behavior? As you already know, when they're having difficulty meeting certain expectations, when there's an unsolved problem. Thank goodness the assessment of skills and unsolved problems is going to help us figure out what those unsolved problems are Most of them are old. We could have been working on them for a very long time, but we never identified them. And we've been therefore focused on frustration responses instead. Once we identify a kid's skills and unsolved problems, this is a very predictable kid, and intervention can be almost exclusively proactive. Let me just do a quick question check here because I saw a very long one in there. Alexis, my suggestions on how to plan for a child who struggles with addiction to video games is the exact same as any other unsolved a child is struggling with. Um, Vaping, illicit drugs, it's going to be the same problem-solving process. Brendan, I want to read yours very quickly because it's long. This is going to be a long answer. I don't know if I can do that quickly, but I'll do it. Brendan is saying, I love this model of non-punishment. I've always been against punishment, but this makes me worried as someone that wants to liberate and uphold autonomy for all people, especially people our society deems incapable of autonomy, like children or persons whose brains do not look like the majority of the population. How does this model address the possibility that this kind of behavior modification, oh, this is not a kind of behavior modification, this is problem solving, is a nicer or gentler form of social control? We used to think psychiatry was a nicer and gentler means of managing the criminally insane, but that still begs the question of if the state is the entity that should determine who and what behaviors should be managed. Well, I don't think of this model as a form of social control. I don't think of it as a form of behavior modification. I think of it as a problem-solving model. It gives the people who participate in the model um, an enormous amount of agency. Um, so I'm feeling good about all those parts. And I think who determines whether you're still talking about behavior and managing them. I'm not. Who determines whether um, we should put a particular expectation on a kid? Parents, schools, treatment facilities. I'm not sure that's the state. So, anyways, those are my very quick thoughts. I'm sorry, you and I could have a very long discussion about that, and it would be fun. By the way, we're not done with the proactive theme yet. This is the sequence of de-escalating, restraining, and secluding kids. And the reason I'm showing you this is this is a very illustrative slide. It shows you what's early and what's late. And yes, I am laser focused these days on de-escalating, restraining, and secluding kids because a lot of us got taught that de-escalating, restraining, and secluding kids is crisis prevention. It is nothing of the sort. It's crisis management. Here we go. You're seeing 5 bubbles on the screen in a declining sequence. That's symbolic. The colors of the all bubbles are meaningful. In blue, everything that's early, true crisis prevention. And yes, you do see a website there on the lower left-hand side. It's a Lives in the Balance website aimed at giving people free resources if they're interested in reducing or eliminating their use of restraint and seclusion. So that's a good website too. In blue, everything that's early, true crisis prevention. In red, everything that's late, crisis management. You don't want to be late. You want to be early. You don't want to be in crisis management mode. You want to be in crisis prevention mode. So what's early? Proactively identifying the expectations a kid is having difficulty meeting. What are this kid's unsolved problems using the ASIP? And proactively either solving those problems proactively and collaboratively, as you now know, or because you're not going to be able to solve all of them at once, putting some of them on hold proactively, at least for now. If that's what we were doing in most places where kids with concerning behaviors end up, we would almost never find ourselves in the red. So why do we find ourselves in the red so often? Because we're not doing what's in the blue bubble. Red bubble number one. What is the prototypical adult first response to an expectation a kid is having difficulty meeting? And now we begin our journey downward into what we're doing instead of what's in the blue bubble. A lot of adults, when they see that a kid is having difficulty meeting an expectation, their first instinct is to push harder, insist harder, founded, I guess, on the belief that pushing kids harder to meet expectations we already know they can't meet elicits better performance. I got to tell you, I don't see it. My experience is that when you push kids harder to meet expectations you already know they can't meet, you don't elicit better performance, you elicit red bubble number two, concerning behavior. Concerning behavior that communicates what we already know. The kid is having difficulty meeting that expectation. We knew that already. Want you to notice something very important here. The concerning behavior is what's the matter? I'm seeing a lot of things in the chat, and you all, the questions are about the slides. We're talking about the slides, and you all are going to get the slides somehow. Angelique has already let you know that the slides and the recording will be on the website in 2 to 3 days. And Lisa is stating very explicitly what I'm saying on this slide. I'm taking longer than Lisa took to say it. I want you to notice something very important here. The behavior's late. The unsolved problem that caused it already happened. If the behavior is late, then interventions that are focused on modifying behavior are interventions that are focused on what's late. If the kid's concerning behavior is of the unlucky kind, what are we adults going to conclude next? We are going to conclude that the kid is becoming escalated. And then what are we going to do? Based on our crisis prevention, but really crisis management training, we are going to de-escalate the kid. You are now very late. The unsolved problem happened a while ago. If you are very late, you cannot possibly be in crisis prevention mode. No, you are solidly in crisis management mode. When our de-escalation efforts don't get the job done, and they often don't because we're late, what do we do next? What our crisis prevention, but really crisis management training taught us to do next, we're going to restrain the kid. And a lot of people, this is not usually part of training, are going to seclude the kid as well. You are now very, very late. And if you are very, very late, you're not in crisis prevention mode. You're in crisis management mode. Um, why do we restrain and seclude kids? Because somebody's been telling us, somebody with a monetary interest in having us believe it, that restraining and secluding kids keeps us and the kids safer. That has not been borne out by my personal experience. I'll tell you about that in a second, nor has it been borne out by the research. Did you know that there is a study? You can find it if you look hard enough on the Lives in the Balance website in that advocacy section. Study came out in 2021 documenting 79 deaths of kids in the United States while being restrained. Um, doesn't sound safer to me. And of course, that's only the most extreme outcome from restraint, suffocation. There's all kinds of injuries that happen to both kids and caregivers when restraints are occurring. Anecdotally, 46 years ago, I was trying to be younger. 46 years ago, you would have found me working on an inpatient psychiatry unit. I'm only 5'6". You can't tell that by Zoom. Working with kids who were usually bigger than me. And my job title was psychiatric technician, which was a very fancy job title for one of the people who was supposed to leap into action when, there's your key word, when When tells you you're late. When kids spun out of control. I was one of the people who was either supposed to lay the kid out flat on the ground, me and three or four others, restraint, or drag the kid into a locked door seclusion room, seclusion. When we had the kid restrained, I was told that what I should do is whisper in the kid's ear. It's all true. If you don't calm down, you're going to get a shot. This was one of the most critical first experiences for me in the mental health profession. I hadn't gone back to graduate school yet, because here's what I noticed. When I was sitting on kids, whispering in their ear, if you don't calm down, you're going to get a shot. They all got the shot. That's good to know, since I was being told that this was supposed to calm the kid down. I leave my shift for the day, dust myself off, think I had done my job well, walk on for my shift the next day. And here comes critical experience number two in my career as a mental health professional. I noticed that every unsolved problem that caused a kid to spin out of control the day before was still there waiting for me when I arrived for my shift the next day. That's because restraints and seclusions aren't problem solving strategies either, nor is de escalating, nor are consequences. By definition, a consequence is an event that occurs after the fact. Let me just do a quick chat check here. I like to try to be responsive. You all are just commenting mostly. Robert is asking, so if we use the CPS model, we have a good chance of being on time. You have a good chance of not only being on time, you're setting yourself up to be early. Right now, a lot of places are set up to be late. And I don't mean just how we're set up, I mean it's a setup. Um, in the new book, I spent an entire chapter on this, and I'm not plugging the book. It's one of my frames of reference these days because I still have my head in it. I spent an entire chapter on the things we do that are late. We do them with the best of intentions, but they're late. Let me go through. This is a partial list. The list is 4 times longer than this. That's how late we are. We're set up to be late. The question we should be asking ourselves is, what would it look like if we were set up to be early? Thanks to positive behavior interventions and supports, we are giving kids a lot of breaks these days. I'm not talking about planned breaks, work for 10 minutes, take a break for two. I'm talking about the breaks we give kids just as they are beginning to struggle with a particular task. If they're already struggling with a particular task and then we give them a break, then the break is late. This probably explains why. I've worked with kids who are getting 15, 20, 25 breaks a day. 20, 25 breaks on Monday only guarantees 20, 25 breaks on Tuesday. Because not only is taking a break late, taking a break doesn't solve any of the problems that are causing the kid to need a break in the first place. Calming corners. Late. When do kids access the calming corner? When they're not calm. When they're not calm. When they're having difficulty meeting a particular expectation. Okay, so the calming corner is late. I've worked with kids who are accessing the calming corner 10, 15 times a day. 10, 15 calming corners on Monday simply causes 10, 15 calming corners on Tuesday. Because not only is the calming corner late, the calming corner isn't going to solve any of the problems that are causing the kid to access the calming corner in the first place. Now, a lot of schools are transforming their calming corners into sensory rooms, which is conceptually a nice step in the right direction. But if they're still using their sensory rooms like they've been using their calming corners, then their new sensory room is late. This is one of my favorites, but really least favorites. In a lot of schools and treatment facilities, they have staff whose job title designates the fact that they are the late staff. They are the people we expect to show up when it's already late. A lot of places, it's called the crisis management. Sometimes it's the behavior intervention specialists. They've got all kinds of job titles, but the bottom line is that's proof that we have every expectation that we are going to be late. I don't think being late is a given. I think we're set up to be late, but I think we could just as easily be set up to be early. And by the way, in schools, there's other people whose job title doesn't tell us that they're expected to show up when it's already late, but we expect them to show up when it's already late anyways. Principal, assistant principal, school psychologist, school counselor, school social worker, BCBA. We also have a piece of equipment that is ubiquitous in American public schools, not so much overseas, but in American public schools, almost everybody has this piece of equipment. It's the walkie-talkie. What I'm always telling them is, generally speaking, when the walkie-talkie's going off, we're late. It's a signal, we're late. What if we were set up to be early? I'm going to skip the parent one because it takes too much time. Teaching coping strategies. I love the idea of teaching coping strategies. Now, there are those, I might be one of them, who will argue that if you're teaching a kid to cope with something, you're teaching the kid to be late because they're coping with something that already happened. Interesting point of view. But I don't really care as much about that one as I care about the coping strategies we are teaching kids. The coping strategies we're teaching kids are, generally speaking, strategies that they should use when it's already late. We're teaching them to count to 10. We're teaching them to take a deep breath. We're teaching them to figure out what color they are: red, yellow, green, blue, laid across the board. Uh, I think that should be about 10% of the coping strategies we're teaching kids. Yeah, it's not tragic to teach kids what to do when they're already frustrated, but shouldn't 90% of our efforts be focused on teaching kids how to identify, anticipate, and solve problems proactively so they don't get frustrated in the first place? Yeah, that should be 90%. The rest of these are self-evident. De-escalating, restraining, secluding, late, late, late. Discipline referrals, detention, suspension, expulsion, paddling, late across the board. Don't be late. A few more key themes, and then we're going to get into the technicalities. Let me just, I feel obligated to look at you are going to get the slides, the questions you all are asking. Michelle is asking, how can we help kids who do not recognize their behavior as problematic? We're not talking about behavior in this model, but there are kids who do not necessarily realize that it's a problem that they're having difficulty meeting a particular expectation. We will talk about that in a bit. Savannah is asking, I have a question, but it's easier to ask in person. So how can I go about asking that question? If the question is for me, you can go to the contact form on the Lives in the Balance website and send it through that way. Um, Savannah says she forgot her question, so never mind. Savannah, you're off the hook. All right. Robert wants me to talk about calling the parent. I'm trying to be a responsive speaker. Jody is saying, can you please share the title of Dr. Greene's new book, The Kids Who Aren't Okay? My understanding is that it's available for pre-order on Amazon. Michelle's making a good point. Then I'll go back to the parents. Working in a school, a lot of kids come into school and it's already too late. Yeah, there are kids who come in hot. And sometimes what they're coming in hot about occurred on the school bus, which is our purview. Sometimes they're coming in hot over things that are going on before they get on the school bus, which is less of our purview, but would hopefully push us to collaborate with the folks at home. You're not always going to be able to collaborate with the folks at home, although we should put massive amounts of effort into trying. There are some unsolved problems on which there's overlap between home and school. Generally speaking, the unsolved problems of school are specific to school. to school, excuse me. The unsolved problems of home are specific to home, but there's some on which there's overlap. Coming to school on time, separating from one's parents to come into the building, completing XYZ homework assignment, coming to school well clothed, well fed, well slept. It would be good if we could collaborate with parents on those. If we can't, then we're going to meet the kid where they're at when they're coming into the building. And we're going to collaborate on what they need from us when they are coming in hot so that we don't do things that only cause them to get hotter, thereby trashing the entire school day rather than just the first 10, 15, 20 minutes. That is a problem we can solve collaboratively with kids when we don't um, have the ability to collaborate with their parents. All right, it is becoming crystal clear that I'm not going to be able to answer all of the questions that come in, so I'm not going to try anymore, but I'm going to answer as many as I can. Let's move on to key theme number three and key theme number four. And what I'll do during the break is figure out which ones I think I can answer, and maybe we'll find out a way for me to answer the rest outside of this context. Key theme number four is kids do well if they can. The belief that if this kid could do well, they would do well. If the kid's not doing well, something must be getting in the kid's way. What's getting in the kid's way? Skills, unsolved problems. Six little words. Kids do well if they can. That no matter where I'm lucky enough to travel all over the world, when I asked people what part of this model most got their head turned around, it was these six little words. Kids do well if they can. I think the reason these six words are a big deal for many people is because of a different mentality that has been out there for a very long time called kids do well if they wanna. Now, kids do well if they can, and kids do well if they wanna are two completely different mentalities. And they have completely different implications for what you're thinking about this kid and what you're doing with or to this kid to try to help this kid. Let's think about kids do well if they wanna for just a few minutes. If you have a kids do well if they want a mentality and you're working with a kid who's not doing well, then the reason you think the kid isn't doing well is because the kid doesn't want to, which is how I was trained to think. But I haven't been thinking that way for a very long time. That's because at some point along the way, as you already know, very early along the way, I started asking myself a very important question. Why would the kid not want to do well? Don't most of us do pretty much the best we can in most of the circumstances we find ourselves in? Well, the kids do well if they want a mentality has that question covered with the following. This makes no sense to me, but this is what I was told. Um, Doing poorly is working out better for the kid than doing well would. That's why they're doing poorly. They're seeking attention by doing poorly. They're manipulating us by doing poorly. They're coercing us into capitulating to their wishes by doing poorly. They're unmotivated. That's why they're doing poorly. They're testing limits. I don't think any of those are true. I don't say them anymore and haven't for a very long time. But let's just put one or two of them to the test. The kid is seeking attention by doing poorly. You mean the kid has the skills to seek attention the right way and is choosing to seek attention the wrong way? Because that's making the kid's life go better? I got to tell you, I've never seen it. I'm open to it. I've never seen it. Um, but even more importantly than that, I've never come across a kid that had the skills to seek attention the right way and was choosing to seek attention the wrong way because it was making their life go better. But if we believe that a kid's concerning behaviors for the purpose of seeking attention, what intervention is going to make perfect sense? Ignore the kid. Planned ignoring so as to withdraw all of the attention, all of the reinforcement from the kid's concerning behavior. Um, Ignoring the kid isn't going to solve any of the problems that are causing the kid's concerning behavior in the first place. And if we listen to the voices of the neurodivergent community, and we should, the neurodivergent community is among the communities that has most often been on the receiving end of punitive exclusionary disciplinary practices, and is one of the communities that has been most vocal about their objection to those practices, and good for them. We will hear some adult members of that community telling us that the planned ignoring they experienced in childhood was experienced by them as harmful. If there was another way to accomplish whatever we think we're accomplishing through planned ignoring that doesn't cause harm, we should do it. Let's jump down to unmotivated, then we'll move on. Do you know that I would never characterize anybody as unmotivated? Ever. Why not? Here's what I know. The minute we take a closer look, what skills is this person struggling with? What are this person's unsolved problems? Unmotivated doesn't even come close to capturing what's really going on with this kid. The trick, of course, is to take a closer look using the assessment of skills and unsolved problems. Um, but what are we going to do if we think the kid is unmotivated? Um, we're going to try to incentivize them to meet our expectations. And there's a variety of ways in which we do that. But if we listen to the voices of the neurodivergent community, we will hear adult members of that community telling us that the sticker charts they endured in childhood were experienced by them as harmful. They were the kid who was identified at a very early age, 3 or 4 years old, as the kid who doesn't get the sticker. Now, not getting the sticker isn't going to solve any of the problems that are causing you not to get the sticker in the first place. If there was another way to accomplish whatever we think we're accomplishing with a sticker that doesn't cause harm, we should do it. Now, some of you might be thinking, but aren't the kids who are getting the stickers benefiting from the stickers? I have my doubts. Uh, doesn't say kids do well for a sticker up there. It says kids do all if they can. So the kids who are getting the sticker because they can do well, and they were doing well before the sticker. Now, why would we want to move a kid from intrinsic motivation to extrinsic motivation just because us adults got a thing for stickers? I wouldn't. Quick question check before we move on to the last key theme. You all are asking questions that I will be answering, most of them. Key theme number 5, then we're going to start getting technical we'll take a break in about 10 minutes for our last 10 minutes before our break. Doing well is preferable. For me, a statement of the obvious. Of course, doing well is preferable. A preference for doing well is why most of us do well most of the time. We prefer it. So do kids with concerning behavior. Kids who are struggling, kids who are in distress, uh, they prefer doing well too. The difference between a well-behaved kid and a kid with concerning behavior is not that the well-behaved kid prefers doing well and the kid with concerning behavior doesn't. That's wrong. It's that the well-behaved kid has skills that the kid with concerning behavior is struggling with. Picture this. Those of you who are educators will have no trouble picturing this. Two kids sitting at a table at school, both of them struggling with the exact same math task. Apparently, both of them are struggling with some math skills, otherwise they'd be doing the math because kids do all if they can. One of them is very calmly raising their hand and saying, "Can I get some help over here?" The other one just tipped over the desk and ran out of the room. And we have just arrived at the fork in the road, the age-old fork in the road. Actually, there hasn't always been this fork. Thank goodness there's a fork now. What are we going to do with that desk tipping, running kid? If we go down the fork we've been going down for most of humanity, mm, but at least the last 30 to 40 years, what we're going to do is teach and reteach replacement behaviors for desk tipping and running. We're going to reward the kid when they exhibit the replacement behavior. We're going to potentially punish the kid when they don't. And if you did that, maybe you'd make a dent in the desk tipping and running. But I'll tell you what you wouldn't have done. You wouldn't not have come close to doing anything about the fact that that kid is having difficulty completing the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math. You haven't done anything about that. In this model, you're going down a different path. You're going to try to solve the problem, difficulty completing the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math. And once that problem is solved, proactively and collaboratively, the kid won't exhibit a frustration response over that unsolved problems anymore because solved problems don't cause frustration responses, only unsolved problems do. In this model, you are improving behavior by solving the problems that are causing them. All right, I'm dying to take a look in the chat, but I'm not going to because I find that the questions help me go a little bit further. But I'm going to hold off on questions until we come back, just so that I can see what we've got in there. We've got a lot in there. I'm going to skip this slide in the interest of time. This is an important one, but it is evidence of the fact that we're about to start getting more technical. Over on the left there are the skills that we've been talking about here: flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, emotion regulation. I know that often when we start talking about skills, what us adults want to know is, okay, what's the curriculum for teaching those skills through direct instruction? Bad news is that curriculum may not exist for those skills. There are lots of companies that are happy to sell you a curriculum that allege to enhance those skills, but that doesn't mean that they are effective or evidence-based. It just means that thinking that we can enhance those skills through direct instruction is very appealing, but it doesn't mean it's true. I'm skeptical about whether those skills can be taught through a curriculum, through a direct instruction. I know many people spend a lot of time trying, and there are lots of skills that can be taught through a curriculum, can be taught through a direct instruction: reading, writing, math, entering a group, starting a conversation. Lots of skills can be taught through direct instruction, but some enter our repertoires through more of a process than through direct instruction. And in this model, that process is being engaged in the process of solving problems collaboratively and proactively. That's right. When you're solving problems collaboratively and proactively, these skills are being enhanced. So you're not just solving problems, you are simultaneously but indirectly enhancing these skills, giving kids practice at and modeling at these skills, because not every skill can be taught through direct instruction. Now, why is that a big deal? Number one, time is of the essence. Um, we don't want to spend our time on something that isn't going to happen. Number two, thinking about the kid here and us spending time on things that we don't have to spend time on with them. Um, I don't want people spending a lot of time working on skills that I don't think are going to be enhanced through direct instruction. The other reason it's a big deal, though, is that it tells you that your targets of intervention in the CPS model are the unsolved problems, not the skills. The skills will be enhanced through the process of solving problems collaboratively and proactively. So why do we even mention skills in this model? Lenses. We want to make sure people have the right lenses on. Skills, not motivation. All right. These are the two things we're going to be talking about a lot when we come back from our break. We need to operationalize everything we've covered so far. And to do that, but keep it simple, There are basically two things you got to get good at in this model that operationalize everything we've been talking about so far. Thing we got to get good at, number one, identifying skills and unsolved problems. You're going to learn how to do that when we come back. Thing number two, know how to solve problems collaboratively and proactively. Now, why are we identifying skills and unsolved problems? Once again, that's what's going to make intervention almost exclusively proactive rather than reactive. Why are we identifying skills? Because that's what's going to help adults view these kids through much more compassionate, much more accurate, much more productive lenses. And why are we identifying unsolved problems? So we can know what we're going to work on with this kid. And the likelihood is that those problems have never been identified before. Otherwise, well, here's what I always say. If we don't identify those problems proactively, we're not going to solve them proactively. And we will always find ourselves in the heat of the moment, dealing yet again with a kid's concerning behavior. Why are we solving problems collaboratively and proactively? Because that's going to promote a partnership between us and the kid. This is not enemies. This is not adversaries. This is teammates. Y'all are partners. It's what's going to engage kids in solving the problems that are affecting their lives. I'm always asking, why would you want to leave the kid out of the loop on that? It's what helps us come up with solutions that are a whole lot more effective and a whole lot more durable because you're not flying solo. You got yourself a partner, the kid. And perhaps best of all, I've already said this, but I'll say it in a different way, and then we'll take our break. When you're solving problems collaboratively and proactively with kids, you're not just solving problems, which is a big deal all by itself. You're not just improving behaviors by solving those problems, which is a big deal all by itself. You're improving communication. You're improving your relationship with the kid. And you are simultaneously enhancing many of the skills the kid is struggling with just by solving problems collaboratively and proactively. When we come back from our 10-minute break, we will be focused on only two things. How do you use the assessment of skills and unsolved problems, and how do you solve problems collaboratively and proactively? See you back in about 10 minutes.
Thank you everyone so much. So it's currently by my clock 11:28. Everyone could take about 10 minutes and then we'll be starting exactly at 11:38. Thanks so much.
We are back. No, we have 10
Yes,
seconds left.
incredible. Welcome back, everyone. Um, and yeah, we're gonna get started and pick up basically right where we left off. So thanks so much, Dr. Greene.
You bet. I have plucked two questions from the list. I'm not going to be able to do all of them. From one of our participants, Caitlin, what about when the unsolved problem is not solvable? For example, one of my kids hates school. And while their accommodations make it easier, it's unlikely they will ever be comfortable meeting the expectation of school. It's just something they don't want to do. Homeschooling didn't work either, and a tutor is too expensive. How do we be proactive in that case? Well, here's what I'm going to think. You're not born hating school. Um, there's expectations the kid is having difficulty meeting at school. Accommodations are usually adult driven, not collaborative. Um, So I don't know if the kid's going to be able to meet expectations of school. I don't know what expectations the kid would be able to meet at school. We're talking in very general terms. I would not say that it's just something they don't want to do. I don't think kids are born that way. It's instructive that homeschooling didn't work either. Generally speaking, in those kinds of scenarios, I'm finding that being collaborative with the kid and giving them agency and giving them voice um, are major steps forward. Worked with many, many, many kids who hated school and thought school wasn't for them. But when we started involving them in solving the problems that were affecting their lives, that turned out not to be the case. So do the ASIP, do the assessment of skills and unsolved problems. You're about to learn how, and start solving problems with that kid. You're going to learn how to do that as well before 1 p.m. Susan is asking, what if the kid can't meet the expectation? Like, what if we're working with preschool students, students with disabilities, etc.? How do we completely work proactively when we're having to react so often? Your question is about to, not quite about to be answered. When we get to something that we call Plan C, your question will be answered, but you're reacting so often because we're still putting expectations on kids that they're still having difficulty meeting. Guess we have a few options there. We can keep putting expectations on kids that they can't meet, cause concerning behavior, and all that goes along with it, which makes no sense whatsoever. I'm sure you would agree. Or we can adjust our expectations and meet kids where they're at. Um, you know which one I'd pick. We have now 23. Oh, people are just saying that they're here. Scared me there. All right. This is the assessment of skills and unsolved problems. This is assessment gold. As I mentioned earlier, this is a game changer. This is the 2024 rendition. We used to call it the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems, but we took the word lagging out because it was objectionable to some members of the neurodivergent community. They were right about that. So gone is the word lagging. We weren't very devoted to the word lagging anyways. Um, so now it's the ASIP instead of the ALSIP, kind of the same structure, skills at the top, and we've now expanded, we've now moved beyond our global four to, what do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, still 16 specific skills um, that emanate from those more global skills. And in the bottom section is where we're going to be writing or typing in, because the ASIP is available on the Lives in the Balance website in an editable, fillable format, so that we can type instead of write. Every single expectation this kid is having difficulty reliably meeting in our setting. So if a kid has a lot of unsolved problems at school, I'm going to do an ASIP with the folks at school. If the kid also has a lot of unsolved problems at home, I'm going to do a ASIP with the folks at home. People use the ASIP in treatment facilities, inpatient psychiatry units, residential facilities, prisons, kids with disabilities, adults with disabilities, you name it. This is it. And as I mentioned, it's available for free on the Lives in the Balance website in an editable, fillable format. Um, the fact that there's a place to check off skills often persuades people that the ASIP must be a checklist. It's not. It must be a rating scale. Not that either. I think those of us who live and work with kids with concerning behaviors are often asked to check too much. I think we're often asked to rate too much. And of course, what are we busy checking and rating? Behaviors, frustration responses. What do we do with our checks? We count them. What do we do with our ratings? We tabulate them, all so that we can come up with a total score, all so that we can compare this kid's total score to total scores of other kids of the same age, grade, gender, so we can have norms, which emanates from the word normal, which doesn't take into account that all of us qualify for the diagnosis called developmental variability. But also that we can come up with what has become the holy grail of an assessment, a percentile that tells us whether this kid has a problem. If y'all are trying to figure out what the kid's skills and unsolved problems are, I promise you the kid needs your help. So the ASIP is neither a checklist nor a rating scale. What it is a discussion guide, a guide for discussing a kid's skills and unsolved problems, bringing people together. In a clinical setting, I'm using the ASIP with parents or grandparents or whoever's presenting the kid for treatment. In schools, it's a meeting. In inpatient units, meeting. Prisons, it's a meeting because we want to get everybody on the same page. We want the left hand to know what the right hand is doing. Um, it's a meeting where we're only going to be talking about two things: skills, that's the top section, unsolved problems, that's the bottom section. Um, if you work in a school, you don't need the ASIP for every kid in the building. That would be impossible. You need an ASIP for the 10, 15 kids in the building. You know who they are already, who are struggling the most, who are accessing the school discipline program the most. They're accounting usually for 70, 80, 90% of the disciplinary referrals and disciplinary actions in the building. Proof that all that stuff isn't working. You need the ASIP for them ASAP, like yesterday. You need the ASIP. Quick point about the ASIP, it helps us caregivers focus on the things we can actually do something about. I've sat in a lot of meetings. I assume many of you have sat in a lot of meetings where people mostly sat around talking about the things about which they could do nothing. You don't want to spend your precious meeting time talking about the things about which you can do nothing. You want to spend your precious meeting time talking about the things about which you can do something, skills, unsolved problems. Um, don't talk about how this kid got to be this way. You can't establish how this kid got to be this way with any level of precision. Don't spend any time trying. Don't tell me the kid was exposed to substances in utero. I know that's a bad thing, but I can't do anything about that 8 to 10 years later. What I can do something about is the skills and unsolved problems that may not be attributable to the fact that this kid was exposed to substances in utero. So many of the things we talk about in our meetings are things we can't do anything about. The ASIP helps us focus on the things we can do something about. That is huge. In schools as well as treatment facilities, I also recommending getting the whole crew in there for the meeting, which is very difficult to do. Always has been, but especially post-COVID. But we don't want to leave anybody out. I find that people are frequently left out of the meeting, and a lot of those people are people who spend a lot of time with the kid. Paraprofessionals often don't get to come to the meeting where we're talking about the kid they're spending the whole day with. Ed techs frequently don't get to come. Um, Specialists frequently don't get to come to the meeting. If they don't come to the meeting, then we are relegating them to an approach to intervention known as winging it. It is the winging it approach to intervention, and winging it isn't going to cut it. with these kids. You can get away with winging it with a regular old kid, whatever that is. You can't get away with winging it with one of these kids. Once again, they need this to be tight, cohesive. They need us to be on the same page. They need us to be talking the same language. So what we're going to do, here's how you use it. You start with the skills section of the ASIP. Everybody in the meeting gets a blank copy of the ASIP. It's free, so that should not be an issue. One person has their laptop out in front of them. They've got the editable, fillable ASIP in front of them, and they're our record keeper. The kid is not present in the meeting. This came up earlier. Why isn't the kid present in the meeting? I thought this was supposed to be collaborative. It'll be collaborative as soon as this meeting ends, but number one, we want folks in the meeting to speak freely. And number two, we don't want the kid to be sitting there listening to all of the skills they're struggling with and all of the expectations they're having difficulty meeting. We'll get back to the kid right after this meeting ends. We're going to start with the skills section. We're going to check off any skill that applies to this kid. There's 16 of them. The general rule of thumb is about 10 seconds each. 5 seconds to read it, 5 seconds to decide whether to check it off. That's 10 seconds. 16 times 10, that's 160 seconds. The skills section should take less than 3 minutes. If you go past the 5 minute section on, if you go past the 5 minute mark on the skills section, you're taking too long. And I bet you're talking about something besides skills. Then you start identifying unsolved problems. The rule of thumb there is maybe about a minute each. Um, and the way you identify unsolved problems, the way you get the ball rolling on writing unsolved problems, and I'm going to enlarge this for you just so you can see it better, is by using the prompts that are there in the unsolved problems section, depending on the setting in which you are working with the kids. So we have prompts for schools and treatment facilities. Those are the same. We have prompts for home and clinic. Those are the same. These are not that different from each other, but they're different enough for us to have different prompts for different settings. We're going to go in order, and we're not going to do something called prompt hopping. So let's start. If I'm doing this in a meeting in a school, I'm going to start with the first school prompt. Are there specific tasks or expectations the student is having difficulty completing or getting started on? And here we go. I think that in most kids who've been struggling for a very long time, you're going to end up with 15 or 20, maybe even 25 different unsolved problems that spring to mind just from that first prompt. You're going to exhaust that prompt before you move on to the next one. Are there classmates this student is having difficulty getting along with in specific conditions? Good chance you get 5, 6, 7, 8 additional unique unsolved problems from that prompt. You don't have to write the same unsolved problem in more than once, even if a later prompt brings to mind the same unsolved problem. By the time you get through the 5 prompts, you will have quite the comprehensive list of unsolved problems, possibly as many as 40 or 50. Now, a lot of people get overwhelmed by 40 to 50 different unsolved problems. I think you just did this kid the biggest favor of their life ever. Um, and I'll tell you what's even more overwhelming than a list of 40 or 50 unsolved problems, having no idea what those unsolved problems are, and therefore being relegated to focusing exclusively on the kid's concerning behavior. I get some very interesting reactions when caregivers, whether it's parents or educators or whoever, are staring for the very first time at this ridiculously long list of unsolved problems. They say things like, wow, I didn't know there were so many. Good that we now realize there are so many. If I woke up in the morning and I knew I was going to get hit with all these unsolved problems over the course of the day, I don't think I'd get out of bed. Some don't. I don't think I'd show up. Some don't. This is big. Can this kid actually meet all of these expectations? Apparently not. Because if kids do all if they can, if they could, they would. Well, then why are we putting expectations on a kid that we already know they can't meet? That is a very good question. That is a very good question. One more. Um, how strongly do we feel about all of these? I mean, if this kid's got 40 or 50 different unsolved problems, we can't feel equally strongly about all of them, right? Right. And that's going to help us prioritize because you're not going to be able to solve them all at once. Now, we're not going to be able to cover everything there is to know about using the ASIP. The most important thing you need to know, and Abigail, you are absolutely right. Abigail is saying, I can imagine that it might be challenging to stick to identifying problems and not behaviors. Correct. But here's what starts to happen in the first ASIP meeting. Whoever's leading the meeting, hopefully they know what they're doing. They're going to say, don't. If somebody tries to bring up behaviors, they're going to say, we're not talking about behavior. We're talking about the problems that are causing them. And by the way, the prompts in the unsolved problems section are far more likely to lead you to unsolved problems because we are asking explicitly about expectations. Not foolproof, by the way. People are used to talking about it gets concerning behavior. It's what they lead with, right? If they should bring up concerning behavior, we simply say, well, no, that's the concerning behavior. We're trying to figure out what problem is causing that behavior. I would call that, though, this was on the slide, I skipped it, going through the back door. You don't want to go through the back door to identify unsolved problems. Going through the back door is where you're saying, here's what the behavior is. Now let's figure out what happened before that caused it. Use the prompts. They help you get to the unsolved problems much more efficiently than starting with the behavior and working your way backward. So yes, it is hard to stick with unsolved problems in the beginning. But about, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes into the first ASIP meeting, it's not going to be the leader keeping people on track. It's going to be the other people in the meeting who are going to call each other on, wait a minute, that's a behavior. We're not supposed to be talking about that. You get the idea. Ellie, trauma will never be the unsolved problem. Trauma is a causal factor, but it is not the unsolved problem, remember? Oh, Michelle's answering the question. I don't need to answer the question. Michelle is answering it for me. Michelle's answer is correct, by the way. We're not talking about causal factors. That's not me dismissing trauma. That's me just saying that trauma is not an expectation the kid is having difficulty reliably meeting. Um, Great questions. I wish I could answer every single one of them. Here's where I'm leaving you short. I'm not telling you everything you need to know about the ASIP because we don't have time. I want to get to the problem solving process. What we're not covering is how to word the unsolved problems. The prompts get the ball rolling, but you still have to word them well because the wording of the unsolved problem on the ASIP is going to translate directly into the words that you're going to use when it comes time to introduce the unsolved problem to the kid, when it comes time to solve it together. Poorly worded, unsolved problems often cause the entire problem-solving process to come to a dead stop before it even gets started. We call that failure to launch, all because of how we worded the unsolved problem. So there are 4 guidelines for the wording of unsolved problems, and they are up on the screen right now. Where I'm leaving you up a little short because we don't have time is for me to go into detail about each of these, but there is a video on the Lives in the Balance website. I'm going to take you there again now. Might still be up. I'm not sure. It's still up. Go to this section. Go to the Our Solution section. If you're a parent, go to the Parents and Families section. Educator, go to the Educators and Schools section. If you're a mental health professional, go to the mental health professional section. And if you're a pediatrician or family physician, go to that section. I'm going to go to the educators and schools section. What I want you to do is take the tour. There's a tour in every section. And what I want to show you is step number 2. In this video, you can get a repeat of me teaching you how to use the ASIP and going into detail about how to word the unsolved problems. Here's the ASIP. Here's a video showing an actual ASIP meeting in a school. Um, so you've got the whole ASIP covered in video, just in that section. So if you need, you're going to need help sticking with those 4 guidelines because it's not self-explanatory. And it's in that video on the left that you'll hear about the 4 guidelines. And it's in the video in the right, which is an actual, not fake ASIP meeting with real educators about a real kid. Um, that's where you'll see all of what you're learning about in action. And then just because we're here, here are videos of the problem-solving process that we are going to cover momentarily. I'll keep that up because we may need that again. But those are your 4 guidelines. You're not writing in concerning behaviors in the wording of your unsolved problems. You're not theorizing about why the kid is having difficulty meeting the expectation. Split, not clumped means we are being very micro, not macro, in the wording of the unsolved problem. And we want the wording to be as specific as possible. And there are specific strategies for helping you get to each of those, which are in slides that I have left in the slide deck that you will be receiving, but that I am not covering. So we're moving forward. The ASIP is a game changer. It gives us the information that's been missing, helps us be proactive, sets us up to be early, sets us up to be solving problems rather than focusing on a kid's concerning behavior. It's free. It's huge. A few more wow moments that I get during ASIP meetings. So you're saying this kid only gets upset when these unsolved problems pop up? That's right. And you're saying the unsolved problems don't pop up. We know they're coming. That's right. Any unsolved problem you've written in on the assessment of skills and unsolved problems is by definition predictable, or you wouldn't have been able to write it in. And you're saying that if we solve the problem with the kid won't get upset over anymore? That's right. It's only unsolved problems that cause concerning behaviors. Solved problems don't. And you're saying we don't have to wait till we're in the thick of it again before we try to solve it. We can solve it proactively. That's right. Wow. This is a game changer. Before we move on from the ASIP, let me just, other people are still telling us that they're here. Okay, we're good. Just a few little more details before we move on to how to solve problems collaboratively. Your next goal is to prioritize. Because as you just heard, a lot of the kids who are struggling the most are going to have a lot of unsolved problems. And you're not going to be able to solve them all at once. And if you try to solve them all at once, you're not going to solve any at all. So we have to prioritize. You're never going to be working on more than 3 at any given point in time. Which 3? Here's an algorithm if you need it for picking. Safety first. Any unsolved problem causing safety issues is a very high priority. This is a safety first model. Safety is a big deal. If we don't have safety issues, we're either going with frequency, the unsolved problems that are occurring the most, or gravity, the unsolved problems having the greatest negative impact on this kid's life or the lives of others. How are you keeping track? You get to pick three. The second sheet of the model is called the problem solving plan. Michelle is wondering, are there training options for schools? Oh, yeah. As a social worker, this is right down my alley. Teaching this to the people that are with the kids the most seems like it would be my biggest hurdle. And wondering what supports and information are available for that, go to the workshops training page on the Lives in the Balance website, and you will find the vast array. It's in our solution, workshops and trainings. You got a lot waiting for you. So, as you can see, we do a lot of training. We have a new parenting platform coming in early winter, and we are very excited about that as well. The educator platform will come after that. In the meantime, there's the workshops training page. The problem solving plan, also free, also editable, fillable on the Lives in Balance website. This is how we're keeping track. You see three columns on the problem solving plan, each representing a distinct unsolved problem. Top box, what is the unsolved problem? And you're seeing that there's only room for three. Those are our three. Next box is critical. Who's taking primary responsibility for solving that problem with that kid? Got to designate somebody. Otherwise, everybody's going to try working with the kid on it, which is both overkill and unlikely, or more likely, no one's gonna. If no one's gonna, this problem is going to remain unsolved. But who is the ideal person to be solving a problem with a kid? The person whose expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting. So who's the ideal person to solve difficulty completing the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math? The math teacher, or the paraprofessional who's in there for math, or the ed tech for math. Who isn't going to be solving that problem? The folks at home. It's not their expectation, and they're not there when the kid's having difficulty meeting it. The principal, they don't know anything about that unsolved problem, and they wouldn't be able to tell you what a good solution to that would be. The assistant principal, school psychologist, school social worker, school counselor, the people we've been sending kids to for their behavior are not the people to send kids to solve the problems that are causing those behaviors. No, that's the person whose expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting. So, if we want to set ourselves up to be early, we're going to do the hard work of retrofitting our schedule so that classroom teachers have time to solve problems with their students. No more sending. Coverage. Realigning the schedule with what's really going on in schools these days. Um, Lots of ways that we help schools create time so that people have time to solve problems with their students. Because it turns out we've been sending the kids to the wrong people for their concerning behavior, and we need to make sure that the right people have the time to do the problem solving. Huge. I'm seeing the chat light up on that one. No, people are just saying that they're here. No, people are saying that this is a game changer. Robert is asking, how'd you put all this together? Over time. And quite frankly, by listening to people. Um, Cynthia's asking, where'd that go? Work in an inpatient psychiatric facility. Is there any reason not to use the ASIP with adults? We have an ASIP for adults. If you hop on the Lives and About, we just created it with our colleagues in Ireland in their disability services. Um, it's the Balance website. Our solution, you'll find all the paperwork for the model here in the CPS paperwork section. I'm going to go there now. You have this in your handouts that you'll be getting from McSilver. But here's where you can find, once again, all I did was go to our solution and go to CPS paperwork. That's the page we're on now. Here's the ASIP. And here's the ASIP A. That's for adults. It looks different. It's green instead of blue. and the skills have been worded slightly differently, and the prompts have been worded somewhat differently, and they are for workplace or day services and home and residence, but otherwise, it's the exact same principle. It's editable, fillable. You'll find that on the Lives in the Balance website. There's a lot waiting for you on the Lives in the Balance website. Can you tell? Let's keep going. The remaining boxes on the problem-solving plan walk you through the 3 steps that are involved that you're about to hear about um, in solving a problem collaboratively. Um, You'll be hearing about them next. Once a problem is solved, it comes off the problem-solving plan, and another one arrives from the assessment of skills and unsolved problems to take its place. This is how we're keeping track. This is how we're keeping it organized. This is how we're keeping kids and problems from slipping through the cracks. 2 sheets, the ASIP and the problem-solving plan. I did see one question that I wanted to answer, unless I already did answer it. Oh, the pending parent section is going to be dynamite. Savannah is saying, what if there's a situation that is extreme and they need to speak to the social worker or something like that? Good, send them to the social worker. A lot of extreme situations were predictable, believe it or not. So, or if the children do not feel like they can trust their teachers, well, then we might have the social worker facilitating the problem-solving process with the teacher sitting in. Um, what if further work needs to be done or addressed? There might be further work that needs to be done. I find that the more we do this, the less we think that there's more work that needs to be done. By the way, I said earlier that you don't need the ASIP for everybody. You need it for your frequent flyers, the kids who are struggling the most. For everybody else, and this is optional, there's the early problems worksheet. This is just in case you want to keep track of a few unsolved problems that you're working on with a particular kid. The early problems worksheet, you'll find that in the same section on the Lives in the Balance website. And now, our last topic of the day. Let me just do another quick question check. I don't like moving on too quickly. Diana, thank you for your kind words. Andrea is asking a question that I do like to answer. Any suggestions to have parents, caregivers, teachers on board? Some of the people in our kids' lives have a hard time changing their way of solving problems. Well, number one, they haven't been focused on solving problems, but I totally get your idea about they have a difficult time changing their way. They're not going to change their way, generally speaking, unless they know a few things. The kid's concerning behavior is a frustration response. It's caused by things that are causing the kid to get frustrated, unsolved problems, expectations the kid is having difficulty meeting. The vast majority of the time, the person placing that expectation on the kid is the caregiver, whatever the setting. So we're on the hook for that. We're the ones putting the expectations on the kid. Um, we call those unmet expectations unsolved problems, and those problems need to be solved. And you can consequence a kid till the cows come home for their frustration responses. You will not solve a single problem that way. But in a very practical way, um, having people participate in an ASIP meeting, I find that to be ridiculously effective at changing people's lenses. Mary is asking, is the collaborative and proactive solutions model considered evidence-based? It is. And in that section I was just in on the website, the Our Solutions section, you'll find a research page that has every study that has, to my knowledge, that has accumulated documenting the evidence base for this model. Let's keep going. Oh, getting people on. Oh, we just talked about that. Here we go. Here we go. Last topic of the day, and we have 48 minutes to cover it. We'll cover as much as we can. We've identified those unsolved problems. Now, what are we going to do with them? We have 3 options for handling unsolved problems. They are called Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. What I've done here is I've taken the many different ways in which adults handle problems with kids, And I've reduced them to three basic options. ABC provides a very nice shorthand for thinking about how we are currently handling a particular problem and for thinking about how we might choose to handle that problem instead. Notice unsolved is underlined at the top. Um, that's because if a problem isn't unsolved, you don't need one of these plans. It's a met expectation. If a kid is brushing their teeth before going to bed at night as well and as often as we'd like them to, we don't need a plan. It's not an unsolved problem. The kid's meeting that expectation. No plan needed. If a kid is coming to school on time and as often as we'd like them to, you don't need a plan. It's not an unsolved problem. It's a met expectation. If a kid is sharing toys during circle time, as not circle time, during choice time, as well and as often as you'd like them to, you don't need a plan. It's not an unsolved problem. It's a met expectation. But if there's any expectation a kid is having difficulty reliably meeting, you need a plan, and you have three options, only two of which you are mostly using when you are using this model. Plan A is when you're solving a problem unilaterally. You're almost never using Plan A when you're implementing this model. Plan B is where you're solving the exact same problem collaboratively. Plan C is where you're putting a particular expectation on hold, at least for now. Now, just in the interest of time, you're going to have a slide for Plan A, but I'm not going to cover Plan A because, quite frankly, the main point in me covering Plan A would be to tell you why I wouldn't use it. Now, we're not allergic to Plan A in this model. If a kid's about to dart in front of a speeding car in a parking lot, you're not doing Plan C. You're not saying, you know what, I got bigger fish to fry here. It's too late for Plan B. I've no sure. You're doing Plan A. You yank on the kid's arm, you save the kid's life. If the kid loses it, so be it. But if 3 weeks later the kid has now darted in front of a speeding car in a parking lot 17 additional times, and you've yanked 17 additional times, yes, I would agree, yanking is working at saving this kid's life, but yanking is clearly not working at solving this problem. You're going to need a different plan. And if you decide, I don't think that at this point in this kid's development, they are going to be able to be safe in parking lots right now. You're going to have that unsolved problem. You're going to deal with it in Plan C, and that kid's not going to find themselves in a parking lot anytime soon. If instead you decide, no, I think this is in range, you're going to do Plan B and you're going to solve the problem collaboratively. See, the problem with Plan A is not that us adults sometimes use it. The problem is that we use it a lot and we stick with it even when it's clearly not working. Now, why would we use Plan C? This is a very important slide. I would use Plan C for one of three reasons. They're all legit. Prioritizing, triaging, because you can't solve everything at once. If you try to solve everything at once, you'll solve nothing at all. We have to prioritize. Here's a term you haven't heard yet, and it's a very important one in this model: expectation management. This is where basically we're not putting expectations on kids that we already know they can't meet. We are removing them because we feel that they are out of reach, at least at this point in this kid's development. We call that expectation management. And by the way, I fervently believe that if we were managing our expectations better, we would be managing behavior far less. Um, Expectation management um, and stabilizing. There are some kids um, who are just so unstable, so volatile, so reactive. They can't meet almost any expectations right now. And though we badly want them to meet them, we know that if we put those expectations on the kid, we're just going to destabilize them further. Now, why would we want to do that? First of all, why would we want to put expectations on a kid that we already know they can't meet? Oh, by the way, what's my very imperfect um, algorithm for deciding whether a kid can meet an expectation? Because everybody wants to know, well, how do you know if the kid can do it? Judgment call. Judgment call. But here's my algorithm. If a kid can sometimes meet an expectation, it's in range. If a kid is never meeting an expectation, I'm going to feel pretty safe in thinking that the kid is unable to meet the expectation at this point in their development. Yeah, but he's in the fifth grade. Every kid is their own reference point in this model. Other fifth graders can do it. I couldn't care less. But he's got to make progress. He'll make progress by meeting him where he's at, not by using a reference point that has nothing to do with him. Back to stabilizing. We have an expression that we roll past educators frequently. Stabilization comes before education. We know that educators want to get the most out of every kid. We also know that that sets educators up sometimes try too hard to get expectations out of a kid that the kid can't meet. There's no point in putting an expectation on the kid that the kid can't meet, and there's no point in putting the expectation on the kid that's going to destabilize the kid further. So, some of the schools we work with have a stabilization program where they are placing kids temporarily for whom we are currently in stabilization mode. And when they are in the stabilization program, we are removing almost everything. By the way, we're happy the kids coming to school. Given the rates of chronic absenteeism that I covered earlier, I'm glad the kid's showing up. Now, let's not punish the kid for showing up. Slowly but surely, we're going to stabilize the kid. We're going to make sure that we're in touch with the folks doing the prescribing. We're going to bend over backwards to be in touch with the home folks. The kid is going to spend a good part of the day doing preferred activities. Stabilization comes before education. That's another reason we would use Plan C. Slowly but surely, as the kid stabilizes, we can start adding expectations back. And the idea is to get the kid out of the stabilization program as quickly as possible, but not before they're ready. Now, let me help you feel better about Plan C, because a lot of people feel bad about Plan C, or a little queasy at least. The kid isn't meeting the expectation anyway. I'll repeat that. The kid isn't meeting the expectation anyway. So now you have two choices. Keep putting the expectation on the kid that they're not meeting, cause concerning behavior, and all that goes along with it, or make it official. We don't want you to meet the expectation right now. It's off the table. That makes a whole lot more sense because stabilization comes before education. I'm going to cover what Plan C looks like in a little bit, maybe the next slide actually. Um, any questions about Plan C before I keep going? Sarah is saying, in lieu of making a judgment call on a child's capacity for change, how do we safely test their boundaries without traumatizing them further? This is not a boundary testing model. This is a problem-solving model. Start solving problems. You'll get the information you need, and you'll understand what I'm saying when we cover the three steps that are involved in solving a problem collaboratively, which we're going to be doing very soon. Uh, Carly, you may not get the answer to your question now, but if you hop on the Lives in the Balance website, I'm happy to answer your question. Um, we're skipping Plan A. Remember earlier I said that somebody brought up the issue of accommodations. And I said that accommodations are usually adult driven. This is in the same neighborhood as what people call antecedent interventions. People often ask me, are antecedent interventions Plan A? And I will ask, you mean, and I'll say, what do you mean by antecedent interventions? And if they say, modifying the environment to make it less aversive, How do you know that modifying the environment to make it less aversive is going to address whatever's making it hard for the kid to meet this expectation? If you don't know that, if you didn't hear that from the kid, that's plan A. You know, changing task demands to make them easier, shorter, less aversive. How do you know that changing task demands to make them easier, shorter, less aversive is going to address whatever's getting in the way of a kid meeting a particular expectation? If you don't know that, if you didn't hear that from the kid, if you came up with that on your own, that's plan A. You know, incorporating student interest and preferences. This is getting repetitious. How do you know that incorporating student interest and preference is going to address whatever's making it hard for them to meet this expectation? If you don't know that, if you came up with that on your own, if you didn't hear that from the kid, that's plan A. What does plan C sound like? Then I promise we will spend the rest of our time on plan B. Giselle is asking, how do we support families when the behaviors are stemming from the trauma and experiences the children are living in a daily basis at home? It's a complicated question, by the way. You are not asking about an unsolved problem there. I think that when you are helping families identify unsolved problems, focus on problems, not behaviors. Solve those problems proactively. Organize the effort for them so that they're not working on everything at once. Um, Often the home experience, the home environment stabilizes, and it turns out that it was all those accumulated unsolved problems that were causing a big part of the issue in the first place. So that's a simple answer to a complicated question. Diana is asking a question that I want to answer. How do you tell the difference between when a child can meet the expectation but just doesn't want to and they just can't meet it? You'll find all of that out on the next slide. What does Plan C sound like? There's two forms of Plan C: proactive and emergent, depending completely on timing. What form of Plan C should you be using 99.9% of the time when you're implementing this model? Proactive, because you already did the ASIP, you already did the problem solving plan, you already decided which problems you were going to try to solve and which ones you were putting on hold. All of that done proactively. Proactive Plan C 99.9% of the time. Two forms of proactive Plan C. Here's one. I'm going to give a home example. Let's say it's 8 o'clock at night, and that's a time at which you would normally tell a kid to go brush their teeth before going to bed. But brushing teeth before going to bed at night is an unsolved problem that we are currently handling with Plan C. We've decided that proactively. So what would it sound like at 8 o'clock at night when you would normally tell the kid to go brush their teeth? Here's what it would sound like. That was it. Don't bring it up. Here's what Plan C would not sound like at that moment. This is an example of what not to do. Well, it's 8 o'clock. This is when I would normally tell you to go brush your teeth. I'm not telling you to go brush your teeth. Would I like it if you brush your teeth? Yes, I would like it very much if you would brush your. That's not Plan C. It's actually a lot closer to Plan A and an annoying form of Plan A to boot. But in a school classroom, not bringing it up isn't necessarily going to be a viable option because you run the risk of the kid wandering around the classroom, bugging them while they're trying to meet the expectations. So what we often recommend in classrooms is what we might call an interim plan. And by the way, educators do this all the time. They just don't call it an interim plan or Plan C. This is where we and the kid are coming up with a plan, not for solving the problem. That would be Plan B. We're about to talk about that. But for what the kid's going to do while the rest of the class is meeting that expectation and they're not, while that unsolved problem is on hold for that kid. Here's what that conversation sounds like. Buddy, you know how we've been working on a few things with you lately? We've been working on the double-digit division problems you've been having trouble completing on the worksheet in math. We've been working on the difficulty you've been having getting along with Billy agreeing with Billy on the rules of the four square game at recess. We've been working on the difficulty you've been having getting along with Trevor on the school bus in the morning. Problem-solving plan is now full. I'm thinking, if we tried working with you on that social studies project that you fell behind on, it'd be too much. How about you don't got to work on the social studies project, right? How about me and you figure out what you're going to be doing during social studies when the rest of the class is working on their social studies projects, and then we'll get back to the social studies project just as soon as we get some of these other ones solved. That's an interim plan. That expectation is on hold for now, but you don't have a kid who's wandering around the classroom. Here's what emergency plan C would sound like. Class, it's time to get to work on your social studies projects. Now, that's no plan. That's just the classroom teacher announcing an expectation. No plan yet. I'm not doing my social studies project, comes the voice of a kid. That's actually a true story. And the classroom teacher chose plan A. And by the end of the sequence, the kid ended up getting suspended for 3 days. But what if the teacher had chosen plan C? What would she have said? Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay forever? No, okay for now. Okay for everybody? No, okay for him now. Isn't everybody going to have some questions about that? I certainly hope so. Questions, kids, classmates, siblings, other adults in the building or on the playground, um, parents of the well-behaved kids have about the fair does not mean equal principle. Here's the good news. They're in a family in New York where fair means equal. In every family in New York, somebody's getting something somebody else isn't getting. What's that called? Good parenting. They're in a classroom in New York where fair means equal. In every classroom in New York, somebody's getting something somebody else isn't getting. What's that called? That's called good teaching. It's also called special ed law. It's also called differentiated instruction. It's also called personalized learning. Why on earth would you shoot for equality? Why on earth would you do that? I know this is a term that has become politicized. That's a shame. You're not shooting for equality. You're shooting for equity. If you're an educator, you have always been about equity, and you always will be, no matter what the politicians say. What's the definition of equity? Meeting every kid where they're at, with every kid as their own reference point. That's equity. By the way, educators have also always been about inclusion, making sure that kids who may historically or for whatever reason are at risk for being left out are included and are in. We're only missing one, diversity. The synonym for diversity is developmental variability. And there you have it. Educators have always been about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Don't let any politicians talk you out of that. All right, we have finally arrived. Let me just do a quick chat check. No questions. There are 3 steps that are involved in solving a problem collaboratively. They are called the empathy step, the define adult concern step, and the invitation step. Now we have a few things in the chat. Let me just do a quick check. Oh, we have amen, love that, and beautifully said and well said. Thank you. The empathy step is step number 1. The define adult concern step is step number 2. The invitation step is step number 3. Now, I always tell people the names of the steps don't matter that much, though I like the name of the empathy step very much. The ingredients of the steps matter a lot. What's the main ingredient of the empathy step? information gathering, gathering information from the kid about what's making it hard for them to meet a particular expectation. Doing that involves listening, and listening is, in my view, the purest form of empathy. I'm always telling people be prepared for prizes in the empathy step when you discover that what you thought was getting in the kid's way is not what's getting in the kid's way. True story, a parent story, but this is so applicable to schools, words cannot say. Um, uh, I was doing a podcast one day. This father, pre-COVID, had invited me to be on his father podcast. And he was telling me about his 3-year-old daughter. That's significant because a lot of people don't know that you can do Plan B with a 3-year-old. That's because they haven't checked out yet the CPS with young kids section on the Lives in the Balance website. Well, you will see video of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds doing Plan B. Anyways, his daughter was 3, and as fate would have it, he's telling me this during the podcast, she was having difficulty brushing her teeth before going to bed at night. So he says to me, he thought he already knew what was making it hard for her to brush her teeth before going to bed at night. He said he was sure it was the taste of the toothpaste. So he's telling me 5 or 6 different flavors of toothpaste later, she's still having difficulty brushing her teeth before going to bed at night. So he says to me, so I finally did Plan B. I'm thinking, you finally did Plan B? And you think Plan B takes a lot of time? Look how long it took you to go through 5 or 6 different flavors of toothpaste. So he finally did the empathy step. The empathy step begins with the words, with an introduction. The introduction begins with the words, I've noticed that, and ends with the words, what's up? In between, you're inserting the unsolved problem that you're going to learn how to word well in those videos that I showed you on the Lives in the Balance website. But here's what it sounded like. I've noticed you've been having difficulty. All of your unsolved problems are going to start with the word difficulty. Brushing, all of the unsolved problems, a verb is going to come after the word difficulty. Your teeth before going to bed at night. What's up? She said, 3 years old. When you brush my teeth with the electric toothbrush, it gets water all over my face. And I hate getting water all over my face when you're brushing my teeth. I said to the father, well, now there's a concern that would never be addressed by 5 or 6 different flavors of toothpaste. The define adult concern step. This is where the adult is entering their concern into consideration. Um, we adults have very important concerns, of course. Regrettably, we often try to get them addressed through use of Plan A. Now you are getting the exact same concern addressed through use of Plan B. What are we adults concerned about? Often we have no idea. Um, Adult concerns usually answer the question, always answer the question, why is it important that this expectation be met? The answer to that question is what you're going to be saying in the define adult concern step. And it's almost always about health, safety, learning, fairness. Those are your big 4. Health, safety, learning, fairness. Here's what the father said. My concern, all of this is proactive notice. Why would we do this when the kid's already having difficulty brushing their teeth before going to bed at night, when they've been having difficulty brushing their teeth before going to bed at night for 3 years? Bad timing. My concern is that if we don't brush your teeth before going to bed at night, you could get cavities, and it kind of hurts to get cavities filled. And to tell you the truth, I'd rather not spend the money if I don't have to. 2 sets of concerns on the table. No turning back now. Time for the invitation step. This is where kid and caregiver are collaborating on a solution that must meet 2 criteria. Got to be realistic. Both parties got to be able to do what they're agreeing to do. And it's got to be mutually satisfactory, meaning the solution truly addresses the concerns of both parties. Now, here's what I've been saying a lot lately, and it's just not just my work with thousands of kids and their caregivers that bears me out on it, but world history that bears me out on it. If a solution is not realistic and mutually satisfactory, I promise you, this problem is still unsolved. Um, Here's what the invitation sounds like. It starts with the words, I wonder if there's a way. What do you wonder if there's a way to do? You're wondering if there's a way to address the concerns of both parties. Here's what the wording is going to sound like. I wonder if there's a way for us to make sure that or do something about ba 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 ba, one party's concerns, and also make sure that or do something about ba 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 ba, the other party's concerns. Here's what it would sound like with the teeth brushing kid, 3 years old. I wonder if there's a way for us to make sure that your face doesn't get wet while I'm brushing your teeth with the electric toothbrush before you go to bed at night. And also make sure that you don't get cavities because it kind of hurts to get cavities filled. And to tell you the truth, I'd rather not spend the money if I don't have to. Believe it or not, you are then giving the kid the first crack at the solution. Not because it's the kid's job to solve the problem. It's y'all's job to solve the problem. Y'all are teammates. Y'all are partners. If the kid doesn't have any ideas, I'm sure you will, but it is very good strategy to give the kid the first crack. It lets the kid know beyond a shadow of a doubt you're actually interested in their ideas. You got any ideas? The father said to the kid. She did. They usually do. And often they are very good ideas. Can we wrap a towel around my face when you're brushing my teeth with the electric toothbrush, and then my face won't get wet, and also I won't get cavities? Who won? Both. Who lost? Nobody. Whose authority was undermined? Nobody's. That father was being an authority figure, and a whole lot more of an authority figure than he was being when he was busy ramming that toothbrush down his daughter's throat every night at 8 p.m. Those are the 3 steps. Now we're going to go into a little bit more detail with whatever time we have left. I'm going to do a quick check here, but I think the chat is clogged with people who are um, telling us that they're here. If you have any questions about the 3 steps, put them in there, but watch the videos in the guided tour. They're going to take you a very far way, a very long way. What I want to cover a little bit further is the empathy step, and then a few other last final points, and then we'll see if we have any other questions, and we will call it a day. You all have been a very responsive group. Um, Alice, you're about to get the answer to your question. Here's what you know about the empathy step. It's where you're gathering information from kids to understand what's making it hard for them to meet an expectation. As you've already heard me tell you, the empathy step begins with an introduction. The introduction begins with the words, I've noticed that, and ends with the words, what's up? And in between, you are inserting the unsolved problem that you wanted to be talking with the kid about. You just heard an example of that. Now, after you say what's up, one of 5 things is going to happen next. And I don't like being reductionistic, but it really is one of these 5 things that is going to happen next. Possibility number 1, the kid says something. Possibility number 2, the kid says nothing, or I don't know. Possibility number 3, the kid says, I don't have a problem with that, or I don't care. Possibility number 4, the kid says, I don't want to talk about it right now. And possibly number 5, the kid gets defensive and says something like, I don't have to talk to you, or worse. There you have it, the basic 5. I can't guide you through all 5 because we don't have time, Maybe we'll talk to our friends at McSilver and see if they want to do part two of this only for those of you who are here today. But let's say the kid says something. Here's, oh, that's right, it doesn't click on this one. Here's the deal on the kid says something. Whatever the kid says first is not going to give you the clearest understanding about what's making it hard for them to meet this expectation. So you are always going to have to probe for more information, a process we call drilling, drilling for information. As I always tell people, drilling is without question the hardest part of doing all of Plan B. It's where most ships run aground. It's where most captains abandon ship, mostly because we didn't know what to say. There are 8 drilling strategies. You'll find them on the drilling cheat sheet that's in the handouts you'll be getting. I only have 3 of them up on the screen because these are your top 3. Number 1, number 2, and number 8. Your top drilling strategy, and Alice, this is the answer to your question, is reflective listening. It's your default drilling strategy. It's the one you're going to be using the most. It's the one you're going to use when you don't know which one to use. Simply saying back to the kid whatever the kid just said to you. Mirroring, usually accompanied by a clarifying question or statement. These are on the drilling cheat sheet, but not on the screen. Like, how so? Or, I don't quite understand. Or, can you say more about that? Or, I'm confused. Here's what it might sound like. I've noticed you've been having difficulty completing the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math. What's up? I hate it. Number one, I'm glad the kid said something. Number two, a lot of adults have no idea what to say next. They think that's the end of the empathy step. They just don't know what to say. What do you say to I hate it? But you've got reflective listening in your back pocket, so you know exactly what to say. You hate it. Now you're going to add a clarifying question or statement. Tell me what you mean by you hate it. It's stupid. Oh my goodness, a showstopper. It's stupid. What do you say to it's stupid? You know exactly what to say to it's stupid. You've got reflective listening in your back pocket. What do you say? It's stupid. Um, Tell me more about what you mean by it's stupid. It's stupid how you make me do math I don't know how to do. Are we starting to get some traction here? We are. Are we done drilling yet? We are not. But all you've used so far is 2 drilling strategies. So, Alice, in answer to your question, what happens when the child says he doesn't want to go to daycare and be away from his parents? You're going to say, you don't want to be at daycare and be away from us. That's reflective listening. Tell me more about that. I don't know what the kid is going to say next. Here's what I do know. If what you're thinking at that moment is, but you can't be with us, you, you're whatever age you are, you have to be, you're not going to be drilling very well because you've already jumped to your concern or your solution. During that thing I told you I did in Australia, which I guess was Tuesday night, somebody asked the question, so a kid has committed a violent act. How do we communicate to them if they're not really in a mood to listen, that we're not okay with them committing the violent act? I said, well, Yvette, you're going too fast. You're already onto a solution. Um, you're already thinking about how you're going to prevent them from doing the violent act again. I'm not there yet because you haven't met the kid where they're at. If a violent act is a frustration response, then you're not going to get to the end until you start at the beginning. What's the person frustrated about that caused them to commit the violent act? So this is one of the hardest things about this model. Um, we are very solution oriented. Us adults are solution machines. We hear just a little snippet from a kid, and we're already thinking about how it's going to affect our lives and what the solution has to be and what can and can't. Absolutely no harm in exploring this with the kid, listening, purest form of empathy, and finding out where they're coming from. If you don't, you're not going to come up with a solution that addresses the concerns of both parties, and you're still going to have this unsolved problem. Reflective listening. Strategy number two is asking W questions. Who, what, where, when, not why. I try very hard not to ask kids why. I'm not religious about it, but I try very hard not to ask kids why. I find that when I ask kids why, what I get back from them is something an adult has told them before. Case in point, little 4-year-old girl that I was working with a very long time ago, before I developed this model, and when I was therefore still talking with kids about their concerning behavior and still asking the question why. I said to her, 4 years old, why do you do these things you do? She said, I do it for negative reinforcement. Thought to myself, most adults don't know the true meaning of negative reinforcement. I can promise you most 4-year-olds don't. So I pulled a strategy out of the hat that I often use when I hear something sketchy from a kid. What does that mean? She said, I don't know. I said, who told you that? She said, my dad. And there you have it. Stick with who, what, where, when. And then strategy number 8 rounds out your top 3, summarizing and asking for more. This is where you are recapping or restating the concerns you've heard so far from the kid in the empathy step, and you're asking for more. And here's the deal, there's almost always going to be more. So you're going to be summarizing and asking for more multiple times in every empathy step before there's no more. And when there's no more, the empathy step is done. There are 5 other drilling strategies on the drilling cheat sheet, but also on this slide. I'm not going to cover them. I'm not going to be able to cover, because this would be more of a 6-hour talk, what you do if the kid says nothing or I don't know. I love covering that, but that's not going to be today. I love talking about what you say when the kid says, I don't have a problem with that. A lot of people think the curtain just came down on plan B, when in fact, the curtain is just beginning to come up. The kid telling you they don't have a problem with it or they don't care is just the beginning of their concern or perspective on this unsolved problem. I don't want to talk about it right now is not a showstopper. I don't have to talk to you is not a showstopper. Reflective listening is going to be your answer to a lot of these. I actually just want to cover, but I want to look at your questions before I cover it, just to make sure we have time for your questions. I want to cover one more thing if we have time, but let me go through all of your names and see if we have any questions in here. So Digna is going to make me talk about what if a kid doesn't say anything. Um, Often a kid doesn't say anything because we're asking them about their concerning behavior. You're not doing that in this model. You talk about the kid about their concerning behavior, they think they're in trouble, they become defensive, they don't talk to you. Make sure you're trying to talk with them about an unsolved problem. Try to make sure that your unsolved problem is worded well. Often kids don't talk to us because we're doing this in the heat of the moment rather than proactively. So you've added heat and rush to the mix. Often kids don't talk to us because we're doing this for the first time and they don't trust us or the process yet. Often kids don't talk to us because they honestly don't know, because they've become so accustomed to having their concerns dismissed or disregarded. They haven't thought about their concerns for a very long time. Worst case scenario, if you truly do not get anything out of the kid, guess and have them let you know if your guess is right. Nancy is asking, what W question would you ask next for the kid who called math stupid? Um, what math is stupid? Then, what's hard about the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math? Onaji is asking, this was asked earlier, how does the model work with populations who are victims of historical trauma? This is exactly what I would do with someone who has a trauma history. It doesn't involve power. It hears the person's voice. It gives them agency. I would probably turn that question around. Um, why is this not exactly what you do with a population that is a victim of historical trauma? But, and we're not going to have time for this today, what is it about that population that makes you think that this model would not work for them? Andrea is asking, what differences in approach, if any, for children and youth with intellectual and or developmental disabilities? You know, I'm practicing what I preach. I'm going to meet the kid where they're at. But what you just described, intellectual and or developmental disabilities, is is just really broad. Within that category are kids who do understand what we're saying, don't understand what we're saying, can respond through the spoken word, are not responding through the spoken word. Um, um, the heterogeneity within that population is so great that it is impossible for me to give you an algorithm. And I like algorithms when I can come up with them, but if there's too much heterogeneity, it makes it much harder to come up with an algorithm. Um, Bottom line is what's making it hard for the kid to participate in the process, and what can we do if we get creative about it or use existing technologies to allow them to participate in it. Julia, you're asking one of my favorite questions. Does one need to have a long relationship or therapeutic alliance with a kid for the model to be successful? That question is usually in the form of, do you have to have an existing relationship with the kid to do Plan B? Plan B is going to build the relationship for you. Um, the vast majority of kids I do Plan B with these days are kids I've never met. There is no existing relationship. Being heard, adults being curious, adults asking good questions that reflect the fact that they are listening, um, empathy, listening being the purest form of empathy. Um, Plan B is going to build the relationship for you. If the relationship is toxic, then it might be better for somebody with whom the kid does have a good relationship to lead the process. Sometimes with the person with whom the relationship is toxic sitting in so they can be part of the process without having to lead it. All, as you'd imagine, all kinds of possible combinations there. Um, as you can tell, there are lots of nuances to this model that make it, I got to tell you, just the most interesting and fun and intellectually stimulating thing I have ever done. But of course, the most fun there is seeing kids and families that have been struggling for a very long time start to do better. That's why I'm in this profession. Let me cover one more point and we'll call it a day. Where do us human beings go wrong so often? This is the last bullet on your page here, on your slide. We don't do the first two steps. By the way, there's a pandemic of this these days, right? A pandemic in many arenas of life, including our politics. Where do us human beings go wrong so often? We don't do the first two steps. We head straight into solutions, which we are busy throwing at each other. That's known as dueling solutions, and it's also known as a power struggle. Now, a power struggle is an interesting scenario. A power struggle is a win-lose proposition. In a power struggle, all you're trying to figure out is who's going to win and who's going to lose. And who's going to win? In a power struggle, whoever has the power. So all we're doing in a power struggle is jockeying around trying to figure out who has the power. What a waste. When you're solving problems collaboratively, that is a win-win proposition. Who's going to win? Both of you. What does winning mean? You both got your concerns addressed. Um, that's what I've spent an entire career teaching people how to do and doing myself. I got no complaints. I recommend it highly. Let me thank our friends at McSilver for having me do this today. And if we do it again, sort of a part two, um, I look forward to crossing paths with you all again. Maybe I'll cross paths with you in New York City when I'm visiting my son. If you recognize me, say hello.
Dr. Greene, thank you so much. This was so fantastic. Folks, if you do want to have a part two, please put that in your post-test surveys because we really we take that seriously. And we always love an excuse to have Dr. Greene back. So please, thank you so much. In the chat, you'll see Angelique put our post-test. Please fill that out. It's really important that we get all of that data back. Yeah, thank you everyone for we were going to have a Q&A, but I feel like you got to pretty much all the questions that folks did, which is
Sure.
honestly really skillful. So just another amazing thing. So thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you at an upcoming CTAC training. Please check the CTAC website. It's just been updated. It's actually now mcsilverta.org. You can come to all of our upcoming events. We have a bunch of things coming up in the next couple months. And in particular, I think there's one on supervision coming up in November. So please join us for those events. And we are really happy to have you all here. Thank you all so much and have a great day.